Hello. Should I pull an audio pad? I'm not gonna do that. Okay. How do I explain that? It feels weird to say that I'm excited to talk about something that has that isn't necessarily like the best subject matter, or it was a difficult read, right? It was hard on my emotions. It was hard on the fact that it pointed out my lack of knowledge about certain histories around the world. It was hard to come to terms with what was being addressed and how the issue that was being talked about, or whatever was being discussed, or one of the most important and vital aspects about the book and the problem that it presented is still not resolved, like in the real world. So I always do this. Let's cut to the chase. I just finished this book. There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak. I apologize if I'm not saying that properly. But, so I finished this book last night. And I think apart from how extraordinary the content was, how intensely the connections were made, the thing that was the most surprising, so obviously like I have certain criticisms about the narrative that I'll like talk about and address and bring to your attention, and we can talk about it. I do have certain things that I'm just like, what happened to this thing? But it's so like minute in comparison to like the entire story that after a certain point I was like, I'm just being nitpicky. Like there's no reason for me to like point this out. I'm just being a difficult reader. But anyway, the thing that was most surprising to me is how I liked it, but then I happened to read the author's notes after the story ended, and that is what really solidified my admiration for this body of work, which doesn't like normally happen. You know, it's I don't normally read the author's note and feel like it added to the story. I normally read the author's note and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. This is just like additional information that the author thought I should probably write about. But for this particular novel, reading the author's note fleshed it out for me more and helped me connect with the subject material more, and also depressed the fuck out of me. So for this one, it was brilliant. It was really, really brilliant. I just didn't realize how much the author's notes that I read afterwards would impact the actual story for me. The fact that so much of her research ended up in the story, and there were a lot of different parts of the story, sometimes down to the exact dialogue, that were historically accurate. Like someone actually said that thing, or someone actually did that thing, or someone actually was inspired by a real person. That gave me the fucking chills, right? So yeah, it was I think it's a very important book to read. Like, yes, from a literary perspective, but also from like a historical, political perspective, from a religious perspective, from a colonial perspective. There were certain holes in the story. There were certain gaps, certain things that kind of didn't add up, or, you know, there were parts that were trying too hard. I thought the Arthur and Layla story was a little forced on us, as was, I think, the Zalicha and Nen story. I think it was kind of forced on us. I don't think that Zalicha was I don't feel like she was a strong enough character. And then Nen was too strong of a character. And I don't know if the author was like, whatever Zuleika is missing in her personality, Nen is going to fulfill that or fill that space. I don't know if that's what she was thinking, but I guess it was kind of obvious from the beginning. I just... Fuck, am I being mean to Zuleika? Because she straight up has PTSD. I might be being a little... I might be mean. I think I am being a little judgmental. I found it very peculiar that none of the other characters in the story ended up being Arthur's descendants, which is where the first part of the kind of book led me to believe. I was like, oh, okay, like, this is gonna happen. And then it didn't, so I was like... Oh, and then another thing that Elif Shafak did at the end of her story, like even after like the author's notes, no, not after, it's immediately before the author's notes, she had a timeline of the drop of water that we read about in the first chapter. And the timeline of like where that drop of water was in 630 BC, where that drop of water was in 1832, where that drop of water was in 2009. Like, instead of doing the, what is it called? Yeah, she doesn't do the genealogy of the characters. She does a genealogy of the drop of water, which was like, moment. I think towards the end, like one of the lines that she says is like, yeah, you know, that drop of water that fell on King Abushapa. Fuck, even when I was reading his name, I was like, this is not right. King Abushapa? No, Abshurpa? Mesopotamian king. Let's do that. Yeah, a real king. Last great king of Neo-Assyrian Empire. Yeah, so she's like, the drop of water that fell on top of King Ashurbanipal's head before the downpour of rain is the same drop of water that could have ended up in my cup of coffee or your cup of coffee. And I was like, girl, I can't do this right now. Like, I can't fucking do this right now. I don't know how to think about time in that way. And there were parts where Arthur was like, also not, I don't know, there were times where I was just like, man, like, you got this, you know? What's going on? Like, you got this. Like, why are you so upset or nervous or embarrassed? You know, so as a reader, I was like rooting for him. Like, I was like, it's okay. Like, let's move on. It'll be fine. But, you know, written characters are, you know, much as the same as human characters, are flawed and will undoubtedly let you down. No, not let you down. Kind of, yeah. They will undoubtedly disappoint you. They will undoubtedly never meet. Like, there's the redemption arc just doesn't exist for a lot of characters, which is fine. One of the things that I did kind of want to see more of in The Rivers of the Sky are Narin's powers. I know that we kind of got a glimpse towards the end, but the way that her grandmother set her up for success, you know, and mentioned how like each generation of women that inherits those special gifts is more powerful than the last. So I was ready for Narin to like fuck everyone's shit up. I was ready for her to rock everyone's shit. And she still might, right? Like, that's also the beauty of the stories, that like it's kind of left up to us. So I think that she does rock people's shit. Personally, that's the future that I'm going with. Another thing is like Narin's dad's narrative is kind of left as like an open-ended thing. Well, now that I'm thinking about it, it's not like I can speculate what happened, you know? And obviously I don't need to be told, but it is something that I was like, I wonder where he is. I wonder what happened. He was able to survive that one thing, but where did he end up? It's a very difficult read. It was a very difficult read. I was moved and not I was definitely shaken. And again, what I was talking about, like, it was hard to read about Anyway, it was hard to read, for example, about the Yazidis. And I was like, why do I not know this? It's not like I didn't completely know. Like I had, I guess somewhere in the recesses of my mind, I knew that they existed, but I think that was maybe like the extent of it, you know? And I understand that I shouldn't beat myself up for not knowing every history about every group of people, every set of people, every culture, every religion, every sect. Like I understand that. I know that like I shouldn't beat myself up over it, but I was just like, why do I not? So I haven't done that deep dive yet, but I will. Overall, it was great. I ended up writing down, oh my God, I have to tell you, in my notes app, I have a list of words that Elif Shafak has taught me. I was like, what the fuck does that mean? What the fuck does that mean? What is this? What is this? And I have just like a list of notes. And then I also, at the end, you know, in the author's notes, she's talking about a lot of like the references that she made, certain books that she read. She did like extensive research, literary research, scientific research. She interviewed a lot of people. She, certain characters in the book were based on actual people in like history. And so reading up on those people, like historical figures and their contributions to society. So I ended up writing down a couple of things, right? Some books that she read that I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. Or like there's like a recipe that she included. A character makes biscuits in the novel and they're actually real. And she's like, oh, the gingerbread cuneiform, I don't think I'm saying that right. Gingerbread cuneiform biscuits recipe is available on the Penn Museum website. So I like wrote that down. You know, I really love books that make me continue to do the work outside of what I've read. I can't just, with books like these, I can't just like read them and then leave them where they are. Like they stay with me. Yeah, I love books that continue to affect me in my life, that continue to have an impact in how I think, why I think, what kind of information I end up retaining, what kind of characteristics in a narrative, what kind of particular things about a character that I've read stay with me, right? So I really love stories like that. Highly recommend. Really loved it. It's gonna take me a minute to read it again. The coolest thing that this book did, I was talking to my husband about this last night and I feel like so geeky talking about it, but the coolest thing that this book did is made me realize the kind of stories that I like to read. It only took like 30 something years for me to figure out, oh, these are the stories that I prefer. This is the stuff that I actually like to read about. This is the stuff that actually resonates with me. And how it did that, so obviously I'm not going to like give away the story too much. The title is called There Are Rivers in the Sky. The story is about water, right? And water as an element, water as a concept, water as a medium, water central to the story. And I was like, this reminds me kind of so-and-so. And then I read something else. And I was like, oh, this reminds me of so-and-so. So the other thing that it reminded me of, so one of the books that it reminded me of, Covenant of Water. I know I briefly mentioned this in my last episode. This was the audiobook that I listened to that like did me in. I was sold. I was like, oh shit. It was like a 30-hour audiobook. Knocked my fucking socks off. I think the closest thing I've read, or closest thing I had read to something like this was 100 Years of Solitude. But that had a lot more like, it was like a magical realist book, right? That was the genre. And this wasn't. This was straight up like literature. Contemporary, whatever the fuck. So this is one of the books that it reminded me of. And then this is also one of the books that it reminded me of. So then I thought about it And I wanted this episode to be about these 3 books and how water is a central theme. Water contributes immensely to the narrative. Water affects and is affected by all characters in this book, in these books. So yeah, I thought that would be, I don't know, a cool thing to do. And the kind of books that I'm talking about, so that was one of the reasons, right? Like water was a central theme in all of those books. And the other central theme was that these stories, all 3 books, are about multi-generational families. That's the shit that I like. That's the shit that I like. I love seeing and being at point A, and I love how we end up at point Z, and how the author, like, all of them, men, women, trans, whatever, and how the author essentially has been given, like, Play-Doh and makes, like, does this with the Play-Doh. What is it? Slime. What am I trying to say? These authors will take the story and the themes and the characters and the connections and just, like, stretch them, condense them, stretch them, condense them, separate them, bring them back together, put them together this way, put them together this way. I love that. I love seeing traits and characteristics skip certain generations and end up in a different character in a context that's, like, completely different than the first one, but still relevant. I really, really love stories like that. You know, and what all 3 books did for me is made me realize, it's nice to be reminded that we come from things that are bigger than us and smaller than us. We come from narratives and experiences which are unfathomable and also repeat themselves. Definitely, it's hard to, like, read stuff like this and not think about, like, my great-great-great-great-great-grandmother or even my great-grandmother, and think about, like, sure, like, where I come from, but also where we all come from. And it is very powerful. Books that can make you sit down and try to comprehend the concept of time. I think those are really, really special. And I think those are really imperative for personal growth. So for the Covenant of Water, I really, like, that also opened up a whole new world for me. Like, obviously I know about India, obviously I know about Kerala, but I didn't know about the Malabar coast. I didn't know about Kerala's, like, Christian community, their way of life, the kinds of food, and it opened up a whole new world for me. And I was very, very grateful for that. The map that it helped create in my mind was very cool. I really want to visit Kerala now. I always have, like, Kerala's always been on my list for years and years and years. South India in general, but specifically Kerala, right? Has been on my list for a very long time. But then I read stories like this and I'm like, man, I want to fucking go. This place looks cool as shit, you know? I really want to eat, like, lotus flower dishes. All these recipes are so cool. Thamarai Thandu Kutu, lotus stem dal curry. Crispy chili garlic lotus root recipe. Bruh. Lotus flower pakoras? Fuck out of here, bro. Anyway, you get the gist. I thought it was also interesting that there was a white male character in There Are Rivers in the Sky that travels to, the Orient and then just ends up staying there. And then same in The Covenant of Water, there is a white man from Scotland, who travels to India and then just ends up staying there, contributing to the narrative, contributing to the way that things pan out. And I'm just like, damn, do I have any white people in my line of, in my genealogy? And I highly doubt it. But you never know, man. I mean, you never know, but I'm pretty sure I don't. Anyway, so whatever. I just thought that those two connections were also really interesting, and the way that Abraham Verghese weaves faith and medicine and gender and genetic disabilities, mental disabilities. Oh, the family tree. Oh God, that's so cool. That whole concept was like really cool. Oh yeah, that reminds me of another point. All three books, all three stories, another strong theme is that certain minority groups are central characters, which I thought was beautifully done. And again, like the connection that I made after I read There Are Rivers in the Sky, I was like, oh, okay. So what all these books have in common, written by people of color, in one shape or form relate to where they grew up or their cultural background or their geographical background, or, so Elif Shafak, I'm so sorry if I'm not saying that right, but she is British Turkish, and a large part of, a huge part of the story takes place in England and Turkey. Abraham Verghese is Indian, and God, he's so cool. Abraham Verghese was born in India to Orthodox Christian parents from Kerala, India. And his story, Covenant of Water, is set in and around Kerala. Yaa Gyasi, born in Ghana and raised in Huntsville, Alabama. And majority of these stories are in Ghana and the United States. So I thought that was cool. Obviously, water being the theme was cool. I think another theme that was really cool, a common thread, was certain characters not being who you thought they were until it was too late. That really fucked me up. I was like, you can't know anything about anyone ever, really. You just can't. And of course, the last and also one of the most important central threads was the lyrical narrative. I don't even know how to say, I genuinely feel like Yaa Gyasi's Homegoing is one of those books that fundamentally changed me as a person when I read it. And obviously, those kinds of books exist for everybody, and kind of happens when you least expect it or whatever. And but I just remember finishing this and knowing in my heart and in my soul that I was the Zara before and the Zara after were just two different people. It's devastatingly beautiful. And then with the Covenant of Water, I was like, this motherfucker's a doctor? How? He is literally the Linda R. Meyer and Joan F. Lane Provostial Professor of Medicine, Vice Chair for the Theory and Practice of Medicine, and Internal Medicine Clerkship Director at Stanford motherfucking University. No, he's an author. Bro, he has received 6 honorary doctorate degrees. These are the kind of people that I'm like, why am I in the same timeline as them? I actually should not be breathing the same air as them, because I'm literally not worthy. There is no way that this guy saves lives physically and saves lives emotionally. So yeah, with the Covenant of Water, just the magic with which he connected the characters and the magic with which the resolve unfolded. I was thinking, I was like, okay, so I have a physical copy of Homegoing, right? I don't have physical copies of either their Rivers in the Sky or The Covenant of Water. I like borrowed them on Libby. Covenant of Water was an audiobook, and The Rivers in the Sky was just like a regular whatever. And for The Covenant of Water, I was like, I need to own this book. Like, this is the kind of book that I would read over and over again. And then I really sat and I thought about it, and I was like, do I want to do that to myself again? Do I want to... There's a scene with a kid in a tree. I'm like kind of tearing up thinking about it. It was, I think after that chapter, I had to like not listen to the book for a couple of days. It's like, they're just gorgeous works. They've been beautifully written. They have been beautifully connected to the human experience, and not in a good way. Like, I would say they all have happy endings, but at what cost? And that's kind of like the thing that fucks with me, right? What I said earlier about just like thinking about your own personal history, and you're just like, all right, I'm good, we're good, my family is safe and everything, but like what? But the gravity of knowing that the price that our ancestors paid in order for me to be sitting here making a book review video on my iPhone with the roof over my head and these like gorgeous rings, it just fucks with you. It really messes with your system. It tugs at you in a way that you didn't know was possible. And it makes you feel responsible for experiences that you never had and experiences that you never will have because of the choices that people before us made, I don't know. It's like a heavy feeling, man. It is an intense, it's hard to sit with. It's hard to like understand that this is my reality, and the life that I'm living right now wouldn't have existed if even a single decision, however trivial, would have been different. It's really powerful. It gets really, really powerful. Another really important theme. We're just fucking going. I'm like, class was just like there. Class conscious. I don't want to say class consciousness, but class differences were present throughout. Obviously, religion was also a huge driver of the narrative. I think books like these raise the bar for literary genres, and the expertise with which these authors can also incorporate other genres into the narrative it's an honor to experience. Like, literary is the umbrella, and then other themes are like horror, LGBTQ, politics, geography, religion, technology. I feel like there's just the way that the stories transported me to like the literal locations that they were happening. I felt like I was in Kerala. I felt like I was in Ghana. I felt like I was in Mesopotamia. I felt like I was in Constantinople. That is hard to do. It is hard to tell a reader, hey, I've made all the travel arrangements. You just gotta sit and like chill. It's hard to do. It's very special. And then with Homegoing, so how I mentioned how Elif Shafak does like the genealogy of water in Homegoing, and I was telling my husband about it. It was like geeking out yesterday. But in Homegoing, she does this in the very beginning. And I was like, I don't know what the fuck this is. What is this? And then as I went on with the stories, like with every new chapter, right, I was like, James, wait, where's James? Who's James? Oh, okay, this, so that was very clever. I thought that was very cleverly done. And she does it in the very beginning because it drives the story. I wonder why she did it in the beginning and then Elif Shafak did it at the very end. Because obviously both genealogies are core to the story, but one does it after the fact and one did it before. I don't remember if Covenant of Water has a list like that. I could be mistaken. So yeah, with Homegoing, they're just I don't know, man. I don't know if I can get back into this because there's, quite a few, there were quite a few stories. All of them were stunning and gut-wrenching and profound and just devastating and horrific in ways that, you hope you never have to experience. But there were some that like really, really, really stood out, right? I think
So,
QA story. Kojo, I think. Yeah. Kojo's story was really, it was a lot. Mm-hmm. Willie's story, that was fucked, man. Yeah, I think I have to read it again. Anyway, this turned out to be a much more depressing episode than I thought it would be. Understandably, I get it. Like all three books, they're thematically heavy. The language is complex. The characters are very complex. The pace, like for like Elif Shafak's book, the pace was like it would be good, but it would be slow, but then it would be medium, and then it would go back to being slow and then a little fast. So there's a lot of like emotional whiplash that also happens with these books, in my opinion, and the subject matter was heavy. So it's fine that this episode is a little depressive, but maybe the next one won't be. I just really thought that it would be a good idea to talk about a book that I just finished, but then two other books reminded me of this book, and then I just really sat down to think about it, and they were all like connected in one way or another, and how that led to like now I know what kind of books to look for, or like books that I know I'm definitely going to enjoy. I'm still going to read anything and everything under the sun, but now I'm just like, oh, I think I have found my favorite genre, generational stories. I really loved all three books. I highly recommend all three books. I don't know if we're ever going to learn our lesson ever until, the meteor shows up. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't make an effort. So, yeah. Okay. I'll see you next time. Bye.